Hey everyone, great to see you again. Hope you're not tired of seeing me on stage. I have actually gathered the GigaBrain Council from a ton of wallets across the ecosystem. But what I thought was really important about wallets in the Solana ecosystem is that they're all not all of them are Chrome extensions. We have great representation from across extensions, smart contract wallets, consumer wallets, all the above. So I'm going to actually go through and let them introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Vidor from Solflare. I dedicated my professional career to building in crypto, discovered Solana in late 2019, built its first wallet, Solflare, and since then we're committed to keeping our users safe and keeping their assets safe.
Hey, I'm Ashik, co-founder and CTO of TipLink. So I've spent most of my career in traditional finance and HFT, but in 2022, founded TipLink to solve some problems I'd had on side projects, paying people on the internet, try to make that super seamless. So you can send crypto to anyone with a URL, and the URL itself is a full-blown wallet. You guys might have experienced that at several activations we've done here.
Hey. Hey, Breakpoint. I'm Vova. I'm the lead product engineer for Fuse. Been building the future of self-custody for the past 2 years at Squads Labs.
Hi, I'm Francesco, co-founder and CTO of Phantom. We're a self-custody wallet on Solana and multiple chains. We have millions of users, and our mission is to accelerate the adoption of crypto by making it safe and easy to use. Brian just spoke about us 5 minutes ago, so that's the wallet that we build. And yeah, we just launched Quest. Brian spoke to it a little bit, but you should definitely check it out. There's this quest to mint an NFT using your camera. Do that and send it to Breakpoint 2023.sol, and you'll be part of our Breakpoint album, so check it out.
Awesome. So I promised that this wouldn't get super, super technical, but I do want to make sure that we're asking the right questions and making sure that we're having the folks here share more information. I do have a spicy question at the end, so make sure that you are sticking around for that. For each of you, you have very different ways of handling what I consider to be one of the harder problems in crypto, which is the seed phrase, right? So, for each of you, I would love to hear a little bit about how you think about not just protecting the seed phrase, but how does that affect the consumer, and how is that part of the onboarding flow for users?
Yeah, well, for us, we think about the onboarding flow as not just getting the user in, but we want that user to basically trust us. So trust is a really important component here, as they're trusting their money with some provider they found on the internet, I guess. Right now, despite the setups that most self-custodied wallets have, where we're seeing that the key store material is stored within the apps, we sort of see this tendency where this key store material will start shifting either to the apps or to the hardware level. I think Saga is a good example of the key material shifting to a hardware level, and I think all new chipsets, CPUs, secure enclaves will support storing key stores and expose these functions to be able to export, show public keys and sign. So in both ways, either if they're moving to the hardware level more down or more up to the dApp material, we in both scenarios see the need for wallets, because wallets show your balance, provide the discovery mechanism, show you basically everything that you can do within a specific chain, in this case Solana, and also need to safeguard the stuff that you are requested to sign.
Cool. So at TipLink, we take a bit of a different approach to set up. I think it's unique in that people who typically receive a TipLink, they're actually receiving money. They're not just opening up an app to kind of set up a new wallet. And we sort of say your mom isn't the target user, but it is the bar. So you receive a TipLink. The link has enough private data in it to expand out to a private key, and we put that on the URL hash param. So we cannot even see your links. So we consider it the non-custodial way to transfer money. So then you'll log in. You can claim the money that you received in a link. If you use an existing wallet like Phantom or Soulflare, you can just connect it and withdraw there. Or if you don't have one, you can log in with your Google account, and we make a new wallet for you on the Taurus network, which is sort of decentralized network that with a few guardians that split up your key, and we reconstitute it on the client side when you when you log in. So so there's no seed phrases, which is a sort of unique aspect of this type of wallet. There are other examples of NPC wallets, social login wallets that also have this property, but yeah, that they have different security characteristics than seed phrase type wallets. We actually made the decision not to let the user export their seed phrase or private key either, because that also creates an interesting attack surface for the non-technical user. And we've seen attacks where users like to use the same seed in multiple different wallets because they just want to see their assets. They don't want to make a transaction to move them, so they just do this, which kind of makes it hard to figure out what's happening when certain attacks have happened in the past on Solana as well. Yeah, I don't know, I guess.
So this sounds like it's complementary with other wallets, and it's more of like the onboarding flow rather than the end state?
Yep. Yeah, so the end state can go a few different ways, right? Like, so if a dApp, it sort of depends on like who sent the link, right, and what their goals are. So if some other wallet were to build a flow where tip links go out, we'll have a new product called TipLink Pro coming out in a few weeks, where we'll have additional customization levers for wallets to like drive the KPIs they care about, give the calls to action they care about, and maybe with their branding. But yeah, so yeah, if the user doesn't have one and they don't want to set one up in that moment, they can use our wallet. But yeah, they can also use the wallet they like.
Makes sense. Vova, I mean, Squad's one of the first smart contract wallets on Solana. How do you deal with seed phrases and all that sort of stuff?
Well, I mean, like our stance is we aim for the setup where you don't have seed phrases at all. So, and we go like even slightly further, and we make sure that the wallet that you're using for your funds actually doesn't have a private key at all. So with a smart wallet, what you can have is a wallet that's managed by a program. It's like technically impossible to like steal the private key of it because, well, it's a PDA. But like it is still managed by regular keys. But like by having multiple keys managing the same wallet, we increase the security. And like even though those keys are still traditional and do have private keys, the chance of losing the key material is lower, because like you'll need to lose like key material for 2 keys instead of just 1. And when it comes to managing the key material of those keys that are controlling the smart wallet, though, we try to rely upon the hardware security provided by the mobile operating systems, like things like Secure Enclave on iOS, and end-to-end encryption for iCloud. So those keys also don't have seed phrases. There is private key, but we never show that private key to a user. There is another benefit in like having in a smart wallet is that the keys are disposable. You can always rotate them, replace them without changing the main address of your smart wallet, and that's how we think about managing your keys basically.
Sounds great. Sounds like account abstraction, all that sort of stuff. One question on that: what are some of the trade-offs when you don't have that private key for the public key that you're using for the wallet?
Yeah, I mean, you still need to think about your hygiene and like your keys a little bit, because like even though you have like twice as much security, how I call it, or just like twice as much recoverability because of like 2 keys being enough to like handle all the operations, there are still situations where you can lose like your phone and your ledger, and then your funds are stuck basically still. So it's not a silver bullet, but I think it takes the user experience and security of self-custody to like slightly higher level. Yeah.
Makes sense. Francesco, how are we safeguarding users?
So at Phantom, we're a hierarchical deterministic wallet like Solflare, so we onboard users with a seed phrase, but we also allow you to import a private key. We allow you to connect your ledger. So I like to think of us more as a wallet aggregator in some sense. But there are pretty standard challenges when you are custodying the key material on the device itself, right? So you want to make sure you're custodying in a safe way. The key material is encrypted at rest. We actually make sure it's scrubbed from memory when we're using it. So we have all these abstractions around accessing key material in the app as a developer. Everything that the others said apply. I'd say as a self-custody wallet, one of the core security challenges is securing the SDLC, which is the software development lifecycle. So basically our code needs to be super locked down. So we sign all our commits. All access to the repository is 2FA with YubiKeys, et cetera, et cetera. We have a 5-person security team kind of paranoid about this at all times. And they do an amazing job on IT security as well. So making sure our employees are not compromised, like there's all these things that you wouldn't think about are part of securing a seed phrase, but they are. Mm-hmm. Finally, I think the other security piece of custodying seed phrases is like users tend to give them away. So you need to make sure users can't shoot themselves in the foot. They get phished, they get convinced to paste their seed phrase in a form, and suddenly it doesn't matter how good your security is if your users are doing that. So we have a whole trust and safety layer. So we have a big support team that is constantly finding and squashing these scam sites. We work with third-party providers like Blowfish to manage this block list of sites that are malicious. We scan transactions, scan domains. We even scan, or through Blowfish, we even scan the markup of sites to make sure to see if they're copycat sites and are attempting to phish the user. So I think that's actually a huge part of how we secure seed phrases as well.
Makes sense. This is super important, I think, for wallets and for users. People don't understand that how important those seed phrases are, and the amount of times that they just save that to their Apple Notes or whatever it is. It is an important process of onboarding folks. Speaking of that user flow, I'd love to talk a little bit about what happens when you get to a DApp or when you get to a protocol and you're interacting with something. The connection process, the simulation process. People can't write or people can't read the bytes that are happening in the transaction, but how can we safeguard that part of it to make sure that people are interacting with applications? I'll start with Vitor.
Yeah. So what we've seen is that, and I think Phantom also seen this, is that navigating Web3 for users is very scary. They only connect their wallet to a limited set of dApps and sign transactions from an even smaller set of dApps from there. Although simulating transaction changes could provide some sort of reassurance, it is not that silver bullet. And even more, I think one of the most valuable things that wallets have is the signed transaction before it hits the network, because that signed transaction could either potentially, drain the user. So we are taking proactively measures, implemented a bunch of stuff that detects if someone's slipping in a delegation instruction to spend your funds at a further dime, hijacking your stake account, and some more very specific program-related and simulation-related balance changes, stuff inside of wallet, and we show and we flag the severity of these potential mishaps that could happen, and sometimes we even require the user to double-check, to click a checkbox. There's even more space to improve here. For example, there's a few attack vectors that are still out there, mostly theoretical, but we see that there's an elegant way of solving them with JITO bundles. So wallets can then take the user's transaction, put some guard transactions after it, and then relay the transaction, and then the whole bundle of transactions would fail if what the simulation would show did not execute on chain.
That one's interesting. What are the things that you think we should do or add beyond JITO bundles to make that easier to detect?
Yeah, I think As Francesco mentioned, obviously there's this like shared block list that a few wallets contribute to. That's a core pillar of being able to flag these malicious dApps, being able to also flag malicious programs, hide malicious NFTs, basically provide the user a very safe environment to operate whenever they're inside of the wallet, and then try to provide as safe as possible environment for them when they exit the wallet, because that's when the real danger starts to happen.
Totally makes sense. Speaking of the delegate thing, I know that some of you have been using the fridges, which we have to use the delegate for. For Ashik, I'm curious how you see those kinds of user interactions, how you accommodate them in the wallet, and how you can kind of prompt the user for what they're about to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's the delegate one especially is sort of interesting. Like for example, at the fridges, you delegate the ability to spend like up to $20, which reflects the range of things that are in the vending machine, in the fridge, basically, and how many people might take. Actually, with specifically Soulfire Wallet, they have like an undelegate function that you can use. But, oh yeah, I remember.
So you're saying that Soulfire has a delegation center. We're able to revoke the delegation and able to take out of the fridge whatever you want?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But
we take care about the user security.
Yeah.
Please don't steal from the fridges.
But yeah, and we've even seen with NFTs, we've seen some stuff where the user might, in one transaction, be receiving an NFT and sending money, but like the way the NFT comes, the person sending you is still the delegate for it. And this is convenient for many like legitimate use cases. These are not like, this is not a scam, just like a legitimate company needed to do this as part of their workflow. But like in transaction simulation, sometimes it's tricky to tell the difference really, right? And these kind of whitelists are important for that purpose. Our wallet, like for Solana Pay, we sort of like flagged these delegates out of the box, and we thought that was fine to kind of work through these exception cases kind of manually. And I think beyond just transaction simulation, you can also talk about trying to just actually parse the transaction, which gives you a lot richer set of metadata out of it. So it's hard to do that, right? Because if for a given arbitrary transaction, you might not have easily available the IDL for parsing that. So I think we've seen things like Explorer Kit from Solana FM that might make this a bit more ergonomic for more people to implement. But that lets you get out like, hey, not just am I going to receive an NFT, but like, hey, what specifically what is exactly happening? But it's kind of a pain in the vanilla state.
Yeah, makes sense. For Vovo, I think programs as they control certain wallets, do you have to put them on a whitelist? Like, how do you treat arbitrary transactions that are going through the wallet?
Well, I would say for Squad specifically, like it's like part of the core of our business. Like at least it should be, right? Like our users need to understand what exactly they're signing, for sure. And like overall as an industry, I think like we should do a bit better in terms of the simulation details and stuff, because like important stuff that rarely ends up in the simulation is like, what are the writable accounts, for example, you're passing to the instructions, right? And this is like writable accounts and signers in general, because the RAG might not be only about like stealing your tokens. It can be like about getting authority of some of the accounts managed by whatever, like a drift program or something else. So I think that kind of information is really important. So that's kind of my stance on the whole kind of simulation state of things. But yeah, for the smart contract wallet, I mean, like the idea is the same, right? So under the hood, you have a bunch of like instructions. The only difference is that they're called via CPI call rather than like top-level instructions. You still need to simulate them, and like because of that, the support for simulation is a bit trickier because you create like for a multi-sig, you create a transaction and then you execute it in separate phases. Completely, it may be like separated in time even. So when creating a transaction, your regular wallet with one you created it might not be able to like give you all the information about what's going on because that stuff is going to be executed later. So you will only see the actual kind of simulation from your wallet when you like call execute. So yeah, this kind of the additional challenges that we have to deal with. But yeah, we try to put transaction simulations to the forefront of our product. I find it like extremely important topic for.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Francesco, Phantom, 100 million transactions. How are you safeguarding them?
Well, I already spoke to some of it earlier. So yeah, block lists, transaction simulation, message signing simulation, which I think is something that sometimes goes overlooked. So users are not only signing transactions that are submitted to blockchains, but they're signing messages that also give have very serious consequences potentially. There were some pretty high-profile hacks on OpenSea where people were signing messages and not realizing that they were malicious. So there's kind of a whole suite of things that users are signing with their private key material that need to be scanned and secured. That's it. I'd say just from a philosophical standpoint, I feel like we've done a good job of not putting everything on the user. I think my mind always goes back to MetaMask and showing JSON blobs and showing raw transactions, and it's kind of this don't trust, verify philosophy that can exist in crypto, where it's like, hey, we'll just show you the raw stuff and it's on you. And I'm glad that that's changing and that the wallets are taking more responsibility for security and trust and safety.
Awesome. Yeah, totally agree. All right, shall we bring the spice? I think let's do it. All right, so one of the more interesting topics to talk about in the wallet space is the role of open source. So I'm really curious to hear from everyone here about how you view open source, what parts should be open source, should everything be open source, should none of it be? How does that affect the consumer and how does it affect your business? I'll start with Vitor.
Definitely a great question. Well, Solflare is partially open source. Some of the SDKs that we use I mentioned for NFT simulation are open source. We also open sourced something called the unified token list because there was the deprecation of this token list, and then we built an aggregator that permissionlessly consumes multiple sources and provides a selective source of truth of what are the relevant tokens on Solana. I think probably most of the audience here learned from examples of other blockchains' open source wallets. We all see MetaMask being open source. We all see a bunch of other wallets being open source. But what's different in Solana is that it's much faster. What I'm trying to say is that the wallet or the client cannot directly communicate with RPCs, because that's not scalable. If you want to load 100 NFTs, that's like 400 or 500 HTTP requests towards an RPC. And the clients per se cannot scale. There's a 10-year-old Android phone which is not able to load all of the NFTs the user has if there isn't some scalable part. So we moved a good chunk of that aggregation and data collection off of those devices and make the clients really light. So I'm getting to my point where this brought us in a space that we have built a lot of proprietary, not uniform read API compatible stuff that we keep closed source, partially because it wouldn't definitely be viable for any developer to spin up all the infrastructure that we build. But we also think that there's very little, if no, technical knowledge to be able to verify if what's deployed is basically what's within the code base. So although we think that some of the core key handling components should be open source, and that's something that we're looking into doing. All of the proprietary tech that we build is closed source for now. And also, it's a question of competition. I mean, people will see what you're working on. And if someone is building an alternative, I don't know, blockchain support, you might not want someone to see it. So we're Solana maxis, and because we're going to stay only Solana to that extent. But we do see I would call it an open source problem.
Sure, sure. I do think the key material storage, that part of it is the part that I think most people are most concerned by. The UI, give or take that. But yeah, I think that there are components that really do make sense to open source. Ashik, how does this look like for you?
Yeah, so similar to Soulflare, we have some SDKs that are open source because they kind of have to be for people to use them, right? And that includes some key management logic, so people can permissionlessly make tip links without talking to us, no API keys, no costs, whatever. But as far as like the core of the application, it is a web application, right? So like there's a limit to how much you can closed source a web application. Obviously, backend is closed source, but you can kind of right click and inspect and poke around, and it's pretty. It's somewhat scrutable, somewhat inscrutable. You can probably paste it into something and try to legibilize it. So I think users can poke around quite a bit, right? And even in current state, but I do agree that taking some of the core key management bits, making them open source, would be a good thing to work towards. But I think taking your monolithic repo, which everyone is quite productive in, and then modularizing it in service of like a philosophical ideal is like not exactly the kind of decisions that like early stage startups tend.
It slows down the
tend to
business,
make.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
The
That's
business,
like
yeah.
I gotta make this change here, push it here, pull it out in some other place. When ultimately a wallet is a kind of cohesive, integrated sort of thing, right? You probably need to make backend changes, key management changes, or whatever, But it does have other benefits. Like for example, if you do that work, it's easier to communicate with auditors, being like, hey, like this part of the thing is like a slow changing, like quasi never changing kernel of it. That I think Squads is like quite good at this, for example. Whereas like if you have like a more integrated approach, it slows you down, but it also is a little bit, you have to tell the auditors like, hey, like look at this part or whatever, right? Even though there's parts around it that are changing.
Yeah, it's tough to weigh the balance between shipping and getting everything out there and safeguarding the user. Squads.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're building a smart wallet, first of all, make sure the source code of your program on chain is available, right? So that's like a basic, like just cover your basis. So IDL should be there. The source code of the program should be there because it's like the core logic of execution of transaction of your smart wallet. And second part, I would just like double what guys mentioned before me, like the part that manages private keys. I believe it should be open source. So the rest of the stuff is your kind of product details, and it's not that important, frankly, like for other people to audit and like look at. But yeah, this keys management part, I think it should be open source. We haven't open sourced it yet for Fuse Wallet, but we're going to. Yeah. So
I guess it's hard to verify that open source thing is the thing that you're actually using, right?
Especially if it's one module and it's like open source at that point, it's like a vanity metric because you're never able to like verify if that module is inside of the app.
Actually being executed, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Because like you can just whatever you can say that this is the version that we're using, but nobody can check, right?
Open source is not a monolith, right? Like open source versus source available versus actually having a decentralized development process. All these are distinct.
Sure.
things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Francesco.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot with what's already been said. Phantom is mostly closed source. We have started open sourcing certain libraries like everyone else. So we open source the shortcuts spec. We open source our wallet adapter implementation, and we kind of have this internal playbook. We're also a monorepo, and we have this playbook for turning internal packages external. So there's kind of a golden path there. I would like to open source our vault code, but as others have mentioned, there's kind of competing priorities. But I do think it's important. I think when people talk about open source, they're talking about a few things, and they get confused. It's like they're talking about security on one end, verifiability, and trust in a few different ways. And as you guys have already mentioned, even if we open source all the code, there's no way to verify. Like that is what is being run. But I do think a good thing that's like a nice, healthy balance is to run regular security audits and open source those and make those available, because that way you actually see, not everyone's a developer. Not all our users can go through our code and verify that we're doing all the cryptography correctly and storing their keys in a safe way. So I actually think the most transparent thing to do is to let professionals pay professionals to audit your code and open source what they find. And in doing so, you actually get a way more human-readable version of what's going on internally. I also just think just talking about what you're doing, since trust is a part of the equation anyway, you can just transparently say, like, this is what we do internally, and I think that gets a lot of the issues out of the way.
Makes sense. Can I get a commitment from all of us to open source more things?
Yes.
Yeah? All right. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening.